Hi, I'm Jeff Tomband from the AppFox team. We're a gold marketplace partner, and we do mostly business-focused apps on a focus on business process, data security, and administration. So in this talk, it will be about how you can simplify your actual administration at scale, and it will be very heavily underlining what other people like Rodney and James have talked about today. So we first have to declare what are the goals of a Jira admin. And the goals are pretty simple. It's about balance, really. It's about striking a balance between having a usable instance from a business requirements perspective, but also then having it usable from an administration and system requirements perspective. So the question is then, what are the problems that we need to simplify? And that are three main issues that underline most of the issues that you will encounter. And that's going to be a lack of standards, which would be something like a lot of customization, very messy names, no real naming convention, a lot of acronyms that no one actually understands. We'll have poor performance, so long response times, long indexing times, the system not behaving as it should. And then you have difficulty maintenance. And that is things like when you want to rename a field, maybe there's dependencies in code on that field name, which it shouldn't be, but things like that go into that type of issue. So there is no approach for everyone because every system is different. Every organization is different. They have different requirements and they're at different scales. So sadly, there's no guidebook we can give you on here's how you magically fix your system, but we will have to give you some guidelines on how you actually approach this. So the most important thing is how to prioritize it. You have to start work against it from the right end, and you have to use your time efficiently. Because if you don't focus on the right part of it, that other things are going to keep piling up, and you'll never actually have the time to work on those parts of the system that actually need it. So this will often be where you're constantly working on incidents instead of actually fixing the underlying issues on your system. So these are the three key focus areas, and these are very much a counterpoint to the main issues. We have standards, and standards are the goals we set based on our requirements and on the metrics that we have. Performance is the metrics by which we measure our standards. Are they up to date? Do they actually fulfill our needs? And how close are we to actually matching those standards? Maintenance is the actions we take to enforce those standards to actually reach those performance metrics that we need to hit. And let's start with standards. It's the most obvious one to start with, and it's been heavily discussed by both James and Rodney on how important it is. And if you don't have standards, you'll have lots of duplicates, you'll have global context all over the place. There'll be no documentation. So when you have a new starter, you won't know where to start, what things mean, how things are supposed to be set up. You'll have vague names, such as acronyms. You'll have vague words like start, end, which don't actually have any context to them. And you'll have unknown usages in both code and in schemas. So standards are often set up when a company starts thinking about scale and they realize there's an issue. But often they will extrapolate it in a very large degree to what's currently there. And often that's a mistake, because often the current usages weren't planned, they haven't been thought through, there's no requirement document for them. Therefore, we shouldn't do that. We should take a step back, look at what parts of the current setup are actually based on the requirements of there and aren't superfluous or duplicates or confusing, and actually make those requirements documents and start from there. And if we don't enforce these standards, there's no point to them. We have to have a process for enforcing standards and a way to actually make sure they are set up as they should be. And documentation is really a key for all of this. If you don't write down so the admin teams knows between each other how it should work, and the users who request new changes don't know how it should work, it will be impossible to enforce these standards. It will also be impossible to actually get users to put in requests that apply to follow these standards and to ensure that they are aware of what's currently set up on the system. But as all standards, they cannot be one standard for everything, and it will be impossible to make a standard that covers every single exception that you will encounter. There will be teams that have very specific requirements that no one else on the system needs. There will be teams that need custom fields with bad naming, maybe for legal reasons. Maybe they have compliance they need to do. And that's when you have to have documentation for these exceptions. But you also have to keep all the documentation and the standards up to date. You won't get it right the first time. There will have to be changes down the line to update these standards to make sure that they actually follow what the business requirements are. And as an example of something that has been standardized, as seen in the App Optimizer, we have a pretty standardized system. The names are pretty clear. We have a few set different standards. The exceptions are labeled. So that has a key. So if you have documentation, that key could tell you what documentation to look at for why it was accepted, why is it the way it is, and what was the requirements document that actually drove this to be implemented. And as you can see, we have no monolith. We don't have just a standard. One single standard in almost every system won't be able to encapsulate all of the business needs. So a set of standards is what you actually want to go for. And to enforce standards, you have to be able to see, get an overview of the standard and the things that are supposed to be using the standard. So there has to be a way to get a big picture view, but then also drill down into the details. With an app such as Optimizer, it's very easy to do with just a right click and click deep dive on any object, but it can be done otherwise through scripts or using a spreadsheet tool such as Excel. And when we come to performance, which is the next big point that we want to discuss, there's two types of performance, but often is only discussed on the technical one. So technical performance is response time. How big are the dependencies which you're downloading to your browser? What is the system resource usage? Is it low on CPU? Is it low on memory, the database connections, but also then the index size and complexity. So that's one part of performance. But we also have functional performance. And this is how easy is the system to use? How dependable is it? Is it clear what's going on? Are the names good? And then you have fault tolerance. And this fault tolerance is how easy is it to make a mistake from both a programmatic point of view and a user point of view. So this includes data validation, duplicate names, and other things that cause confusion to the user. With performance, you can see massive benefits if you do a cleanup. And this little video that you can see is from one of our big enterprise customers. And they showed this in one of their Atlassian Summit talks. And using Optimizer, they were able to clean up their system and get massive performance benefits. And this is why we got to focus on performance, because this isn't just technical performance. So sure, we improve the technical performance, but we also improve the functional performance as the system is now usable, it's easy to use, and because it will actually load quicker, it will decrease the confusion from people thinking this, maybe it's empty, maybe it's an empty dropdown. And with performance, actually getting the overview of the functional performance is very critical. As James and Rodney and also Peter discussed, it's very important that you know what's on your system. It's very important that you know sort of the red flags that show up that tell you something needs to change, something is different. And this might be that maybe just your standards are out of date, because it might not just be that this is wrong. It could be that your standards are wrong and you need to modernize a bit. And with this, from performance, we come to maintenance. And this is actually what we do to reach that performance target, but also that standardization target. And if we do it unassisted, it's very difficult. And most often you will have a tool, a plugin such as Optimizer, or otherwise you will most likely have a script, or you'll have to use Excel. And for every single change, to see the dependencies from, let's say, a custom field down to what projects use it on the screens, it's a 4-step process for every single custom field. And you'll have to make spreadsheets and copy, paste data, or manually enter it. And just the risk of making a mistake is very huge. It's massive, really. And therefore, you need to have some type of tool to assist you, whether it's in-house or whether it's an available solution. And when it comes to maintenance, we have two types of maintenance, really. And sadly, most of the time for admins will be spent on the reactive part. And the reactive is putting out fires, incident management, while we actually have a proactive part, which is actually preventing the issues from occurring. We want to make sure that we don't just get bogged down with these incidents constantly, and we actually get to the part of where we're cleaning up the system, optimizing, and we're seeing where the system is going, and we're getting to a better place every single day. And that's where what we mentioned before with prioritization is very important. So we actually can get that time in every single day to improve the system and not just put out fires. And if you have something like Optimizer for Jira, actually doing this maintenance of improving the system, cleaning up is very easy because you can do both changes at scale. You can very easily filter through, see what dependencies are where, and bulk delete unused objects. And with preventative maintenance, what's really important is actually seeing dependencies, seeing duplicates, and cutting down the fat on the system, and really getting to those key areas that you need to keep those standards up to date. And really, being preventative is the goal. That's what we have to do. And sadly, that's really often something that doesn't get done, doesn't get the attention it deserves. And what we really need to do there is what we've gone through here, what James has gone through, and what Peter has gone through, is we got to standardize, but we also got to look at what are the realistic goals for that standard. But we can't just sit on our laurels with those standards. We have to keep them up to date. We have to look at the business requirements and be flexible with them.